Welcome to the Bookman's Corner. I'm Lois Lindstrom. Our topic today is U.S. agriculture, and our guest author is Joel Salatin, who wrote the book, Folks, This Ain't Normal, A Farmer's Advice for Happier Hens, Healthier People, and a Better World. Welcome to our show, Joel.
Thank you, Lois. It's wonderful to be with you.
In your book, you say it's high time we stop taking our industrialized food system as a given and instead consider local, sustainable food production as the norm. Family farmer Joel Salatin has been hailed by the New York Times as Virginia's most multifaceted agrarian since Thomas Jefferson, and he was profiled in the Academy Award-nominated documentary Food, Inc., and in the best-selling book The Omnivore's Dilemma. In his book, Folks, This Ain't Normal, he discusses how far removed we are from the simple, sustainable joy that comes from living close to the land and the people we love. Joel, many Americans share your views about the evils of industrialized farming. How can people get the federal government to change its ways? I mean, as you wrote in your book, we've used more energy, destroyed more soil, created more pathogens, mutated more bacteria, and dumped more toxicity on the planet than all the cultures before us. What can be done to change this?
Well, I think the answer is grassroots, one person at a time.
Okay.
People have to understand that if what I advocate became normal again, it would completely invert the power, position, profits, and prestige of the entire food and farming sector. That's a big ship to turn around.
Huge, huge. You've been working the family farm on 100 acres in Virginia's Shenandoah Valley, about 8 miles from Stanton, Virginia, since 1982. Please give our viewers a quick summary of the history of your family farm, Polyface, Inc.
Sure. Well, Mom and Dad bought the farm in 1961. I was just 4 years old.
Okay.
And Dad had a dream of this ecological farm. He was an economist by training, but saw the chemical agriculture kind of as a drug addiction. You have to buy more and more to stay with it, you know. And so he and Mom worked out. Mom was a high school phys ed teacher. Dad was an accountant, and they used the off-farm income to pay for the land.
Okay.
So then when I came up through high school, I started with chickens and pasture-based perennials. Dad was very much a student of nature. How do we duplicate nature's template, on a domestic production model? So that's the way I grew up. I grew up on Mother Earth News and Organic Farming and Gardening magazine, and by the time I was out of high school, realized I really wanted to farm full time, and so Teresa and I got married. And then we went to the farm full time, but we didn't get there immediately. We both worked out for about a year, accumulated a little nest egg, enough we could live on for a year, and then went to the farm full time and never looked back.
Well, I find it fascinating that you have written 9 books and you are a popular conference speaker. I mean, where did you earn your BA degree in English, and which magazines regularly publish your work?
Well, sure. Well, I went to college at Bob Jones University in South Carolina, the Christian liberal arts school, majored in English, just straight English, but really I majored in debate. I was in drama and debate through high school, debate in college, and that was my best subject. Training, that I could have done was learning how to communicate spontaneously, and so I always had a gift for writing. When I was in school, I would enter essay contests, and I don't think I ever entered one that I didn't win. I mean, I would
that's
just
impressive.
Yeah, I would just enter them, and so I knew I had a gift, and thought that I would write sometime, but didn't really know when. And of course, I was the 2 years between college and going back to the farm full time. I was an investigative reporter at the local newspaper, where I worked my junior and senior years in high school part-time as well. So, my mentors were these good old curmudgeon city editors, run the editor desk. Right. And, you can't have writer's block. The presses are going to run. We've got to get this out.
It was great training.
So that was wonderful training for speaking, writing, communicating, and storytelling.
Yes, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Well, what are some of the titles of your books?
Well, sure. There are all sorts. The first one was Pastured Poultry Profits, because that was what people were interested in there early on, this pastured poultry, what is that? And so we did that book, and then Salad Bar Beef came on behind that. And then people wanted a larger eclectic view. So I wrote what's for me been my bestseller, is You Can Farm, The Entrepreneur's Guide to Start and Succeed in a Farming Enterprise. And that one has sold well over 60,000 copies. There's a lot of interest in agrarianism, entrepreneurial farming, cottage familial farming type of stuff. And so that was the one there. Then I went, people said, well, how do I get my kids to enjoy chores and enjoy the farm? So I did family-friendly farming. And then, the sheer ecstasy of being a lunatic farmer. Everything I want to do is illegal. And then most recently, Fields of Farmers, interning, mentoring, partnering, and germinating the next generation of farmers.
Well, let me ask you, what book has been your biggest success?
Well, You Can Farm has certainly been the biggest success, along with Folks This Ain't Normal.
Okay.
Those two have certainly been our biggest success.
At the top of the list. That's fantastic. Do you think you have a chance to change our government's mindset about agricultural policy?
I really don't have much faith in the government. I have a lot of faith in individuals and what individual people can do in their daily lives. You have to understand that the USDA, I call it the USDA, and the FDA are essentially, as we saw in the movie Food Inc. with the revolving business cards, is really a fraternity with the industrial food system. And I don't say conspiracy because you're a nut if you use the word conspiracy.
Right.
But I call it a fraternity of ideas. And they've essentially created an orthodoxy that crowds out the heretics. I'm the heretic.
Right.
And so there's an orthodoxy of view. In other words, that wellness comes from a man-made concoction, a pharmaceutical, a chemical. Fertility comes from outside, not inside. Farms should be places where consumers don't go, where you have to walk through sheep dip and put on a hazmat suit to go visit your food. There's a definite orthodoxy that safe food must all be bathed in, chlorine and sanitizers.
Right.
That makes it safe. Our view is what makes it safe is that it doesn't have the pathogenicity to begin with.
Exactly.
So can we produce it without any pathogenicity to start? So, these are orthodoxies that have come into the system. So, they have their deal, I have mine. My request would be, what? I won't picket your system
if you don't,
but let my customers and me exist and have the food of our choice from the source of our choice.
Exactly. Well, what is your view of genetically modified crops? I mean, this Monsanto, this has been a big. This has created a lot of concern in Europe.
Sure.
What do you think?
Sure. Well, I think that it's an absolutely aberration of nature, and there are a lot of negatives, coming down. We now have last year 74 worldwide studies impugning not only the claims, but showing collateral damage from birth defects, infertility, even some links now to autism, with extra glyphosate usage. So, there are some real issues around genetically modified organisms.
Is the federal government ignoring this?
Well, absolutely, because it's the orthodoxy.
Okay.
The orthodoxy of our time is that life is fundamentally mechanical and not biological.
Okay.
There's a big difference between mechanics and biology.
Yes.
And when you view life as fundamentally mechanical, then we can manipulate life just like you would manipulate an extruded plastic doll or a piece of copper plumbing fitting, right?
Yes.
And so when you take that view, nothing becomes sacred.
Yes.
It's all subject to our manipulation.
Well, our viewers should know that you have been featured in Smithsonian Magazine, Time Magazine, National Geographic, and Gourmet Magazine, along with being interviewed on countless radio and TV media outlets. What has been your most rewarding and fulfilling media interview?
Oh, the most rewarding media interview. Oh my, there's been so many of them, it's hard to say. Probably the one on ABC with Peter Jennings. That was pretty much a pinnacle there.
Yes. Now, when did that take place?
That took place, about 10 years ago.
Okay.
Obviously, he was still living at that time, and we were just the big media outlets were just beginning their chat rooms. You know, the internet was just really coming in, and he profiled me on Lives of the 21st Century. That was a kind of a series that he was doing. So I was really honored to be on there and to actually interact.
I agree with
that.
you. That would have been terrific.
Yeah.
Now, your farm services more than 5,000 families, 10 retail outlets, and 50 restaurants through on-farm sales and metropolitan buying clubs. How big is the staff at your farm to handle all of this? And what are the Eggmobile eggs I read about in your book? Folks, this ain't normal.
Well, our staff is roughly 20 people. I mean, if you took part-time and all that stuff and added them all together, it's about a staff of about 20. And of course, not all that staff is actively farming. I mean, we have clerical staff, delivery, and so there's accounting. Somebody's got to pay the bills, and watch the bank account. So there are many gifts and talents there as part of it. But the Eggmobile eggs are produced in portable hen houses that follow the cows. So this developed. I developed this idea when we had the cows, and we said, well, how does nature sanitize behind herbivores? I mean, at the most fundamental level, a cow is an herbivore. Realize that the USDA doesn't view that a cow is an herbivore. They think a cow is an omnivore. And for 30 years, of course, told us to feed dead cows to cows.
Yeah,
and then
mad cow disease and
gave us,
right?
Bovine spongiform encephalopathy, mad cow. So this is a violation of the pattern, the pattern in nature. So we look at the pattern and we say, well, how does nature sanitize behind herbivores? And you find birds. Birds, the egret on the rhino's nose. Birds follow the wildebeest on the Serengeti, the Cape buffalo, the bison. The birds, eat the bugs and the insects and scratch through the dung and eat out the fly larvae and the bugs.
Right.
And so we follow the cows with these portable hen houses so that the laying hens scratch out through the cow patties, spread out that fertilizer, and harvest the parasites and bugs out of that and act as a biological sanitizer.
Incredible. You wrote that all farms should be extremely transparent. You wrote that people would not feel safe if they walked by an industrial type farm. Why not?
Well, for one thing, it stinks. It smells.
Really?
So you have
And your farm doesn't stink.
No, we think that a farm should be aesthetically and aromatically, sensually romantic.
Okay.
In other words, if a kindergarten class visits and says, "Ooh, this is yucky," that's not good farming and not good food production.
Interesting.
And there's a reason why the industry has pushed back on undercover agents with little microphones and photographs to photograph what's going on, because as Michael Pollan said in Omnivore's Dilemma, if industrial agriculture had glass walls, we'd probably eat very differently in this country.
Yes, people would be pretty shocked, wouldn't they?
So on our farm, we have a 24/7, 365 open door policy.
Amazing.
For anyone to come from anywhere in the whole world, anytime, to see anything.
Well, do they have to pay to get into your farm? They don't have to buy a ticket?
It's totally open. That's our commitment to transparency.
Amazing. Well, you wrote that you are beyond organic farming. What do you mean by that?
Well, by that I mean organic is not a comprehensive term.
Okay.
Well, let's take, for example, a carrot.
Okay.
We're going to grow an organic carrot. That soil can be prepared, fertilized by either on-farm generated compost or by fish emulsion from Japanese drift net off catch, which we wouldn't really like very much. There are numerous ways to prepare that soil. Then we're going to plant the carrots. Well, the carrots could be heirloom seeds. They could be hybrid seeds. They could be all sorts of things. And then we could plant them with either paid labor or labor gets to be a funky issue sometimes, but anyway, labor that you might or might not
Yes.
agree with,
Okay.
along with labor policies that you might or might not agree with. And then we got to keep the weeds down, right? So we can keep the weeds down with tillage, with mulch, with plastic.
So
You get my point.
Yes.
And that's just carrots. I mean, imagine an animal which even has more, possibilities.
Yes.
And so the problem with the government owning the word organic is that it has codified a list of do's and don'ts that are extremely
Limiting.
minimal.
Yeah, minimal.
They're
Okay.
minimal. It's like a pass-fail course in college.
Okay.
A
Okay.
pass-fail, you never do your best. You want to do your best when you can get an A.
Exactly. Do you think there are energy hypocrites running our energy policy, and how can this be changed?
Oh, well, I certainly do. And I think, again, it can be changed by simply you and I looking at our situation and saying, okay, can I put a solarium on the side of my house? There are very few houses or buildings that don't have enough room, 10 feet out from the southern exposure, to be able to put, for example, a solarium, a passive, solarium. Not only can you grow vegetables in the wintertime in those, but you get passive heat that you can then use a squirrel cage fan with a thermocouple, and when the temperature differential is right, we can get all that solar, heat into the building. Roofs. How many roofs can grow gardens? Some perlite and compost, and boom, we're growing food. And suddenly, the room cools down because of the cooling effect of transpiration from the leaves of the plants surrounding the building in plants. And so
Fascinating.
this is not rocket science.
Yes,
It's
yes.
very, very doable on an individual retrofit basis.
Well, you wrote that factory farming fails to differentiate between animals raised well and those that are not. Why is this happening?
Well, because if we differentiated between a system that honored the pigness of the pig and one that didn't, it would bring an ethical, moral dimension into our production practices. Well, we can't afford to do that, because as soon as you bring an ethical, moral dimension, then you're suddenly understanding that, oh, this is not just mechanical. Well, if it's not mechanical, if it does matter, if a pig is happy or a tomato is happy, if it does matter, then there are constraints on our cleverness.
Yes.
And we don't want any constraints on our cleverness.
Right, right. Well, of course, I feel like some of these animals in these industrialized settings are really being abused. And
Oh, yeah.
It's just hideous.
Absolutely. I mean, you certainly wouldn't want to live there. No. I always tell people, if you have to walk through sheep dip, and you got to say that very carefully,
Right.
sheep dip, and put on a hazmat suit to go visit your food, you might not want to eat it.
Exactly. It's really frightening. Well, how did the chemical-based agriculture become the dominant paradigm? Why did we have all of a sudden all these chemicals introduced into our food?
Well, there are numerous timelines. It really started in 1837 when Justus von Liebig, the Austrian biophysicist, with his vacuum tubes, determined that all life is simply a rearrangement of nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus. If all life is simply a rearrangement of inert matter, then it mechanizes life, all right? And so as we came into the 20th century, there was a glitch there when we were urbanizing, the Dust Bowl era.
Right.
We did not have extremely efficient ways, the technology did not exist to efficiently create a carbon-centric in-sourced fertility program.
Okay.
And so, and we had, of course, the war effort, World War I, World War II. NP and K are also the basis of ammunition, bombs, okay? So we essentially had a war budget that financed the mining, laboratory analysis, distribution, and making of synthetic NP and K for ammunition, which all of that infrastructure, the factories and the distribution channels, the sales force, they were all
in place.
Yes. post World War II, and that's when we saw this
Huge.
huge
Increase.
magnification
Yes.
of use of those things. Sir Albert Howard, a lot of people don't realize that modern scientific aerobic composting was really not introduced to the world until 1943 by Sir Albert Howard. So I find it fascinating that scientific aerobic composting and the leftover ammunition
Somehow,
kind of arrived on the scene
at the same time. That's right.
Yeah.
Well, you wrote that government policy also forbids cutting in our national forests and parks, and that is a big mistake. You wrote that the Yellowstone Park fires were a result of the no-cut policy that allowed too much fuel to build up. I mean, is the same thing going to happen to the Shenandoah National Park, you think?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, the Shenandoah National Park is in steep decline. If you talk to the foresters at Virginia Tech, the forestry professors, the whole Appalachian hardwood region is in steep decline because of a lack of forestal disturbance. See, there used to be routine what are called cold ground fires that would take out a lot of the brush and refresh the ground.
I mean, and these fires were a result of lightning or nature or?
Mainly Native Americans.
Oh, Native
But a
Americans.
lot of them were lightning.
Okay.
And then there was another component of that, which were the big herds of buffalo. You know, I went to Buffalo Gap High School. You know, there were millions of buffalo through here, and elk, and prairie chickens and pheasants.
And so when they stampeded through the forest,
Yes.
they got rid of some of the broken
yes.
branches and.
Yes, they would chip up and open it up. They opened it up.
Okay.
So the very enclosed, tight, dark forests that we think of now on the Mid-Atlantic region are essentially a European thing.
Okay.
As a result of elimination of the buffalo and elimination of periodic sequential burning. Yeah.
My
So
goodness.
on our farm, we're now using high-tech electric fencing and pigs to move them around the forest to compensate for the lack of fire and the lack of bison, to reopen, to freshen it up, and do the light disturbance
Okay.
that's necessary to keep everything healthy.
In a world of starving people, how can we afford land wasting models like animal production? I mean, many charge that animal production increases famine.
Sure. Well, you have to understand that all of these studies, from the UN Long Shadow Report to the World Wildlife Fund to whatever, all of the studies are based on the status quo.
Yes.
And nobody is a bigger opponent of the status quo than I am.
Right.
Here's the thing. The reason for the herbivore is to prune the biomass back to stimulate rejuvenated succulent growth, like an orchardist would prune an apple tree or a viticulturalist would prune a vineyard. And that's why there are herbivores everywhere, because biomass needs pruning to get it freshened up. So the problem is not the herbivore, the problem is not the animal, the problem is that farmers and ranchers and nomads, and I mean this has been going on way earlier than America, have overgrazed.
Okay.
They have used domestic livestock to continuously graze things, to deny the biomass, the plant, the grass, clovers and stuff, to be able to go through its blaze of growth curve.
So they need to use different pastures and that kind of
Need
thing.
to use different things and move the animals
Around.
around, like the buffalo move, the wildebeest move, the Cape buffalo move, like everything moves in nature.
Well, you wrote that much of the world's land is not suitable for tillage. Why not?
Because it's too steep or too fragile or too rocky. I mean, there are lots of reasons why land would not be good for tillage, but would be good for producing vegetation.
Aha. And you wrote about the difference in hay and straw. I mean, most people don't even know about those definitions. What are they? What's the difference between hay and straw?
Sure. Hay is solar dried grass.
Solar dried grass.
In other words, think of your lawn, grass, you cut it, and the sun comes out and it turns crinkly and dry.
Right.
That's hay.
That's hay,
All
okay.
right? Straw is the leftover plant after you've taken off a grain, like wheat, rye, barley, you take off the grain, and what's left, the stalk and the old dried leaves, that's the straw.
Well, you wrote that the U.S. shouldn't be committing billions of dollars in military action to ensure a cheap supply of oil. How can we be self-sufficient in our energy needs?
Sure. Well, I'm all a believer in utilizing resources. I'm not a no petroleum guy.
Okay.
Here's the tragedy, that we have been given, if you will, in this little glitch of modern American time, for the first time in human civilization, cheap oil,
Right.
and amazing machinery. If we leverage that petroleum to remediate the damage that humankind has exerted on the planet since the beginning of time, we could remediate that and leave a legacy of Eden, if you will, of healing for our grandchildren. Instead, we have simply spent that petroleum like a bunch of drunken sailors, as if there's no tomorrow, building, food systems that
depend on
that transport at 3,000 miles.
That's right. So
yes, and use petroleum-based fertilizers
Right.
instead of animal manures, and we have squandered it rather than leveraging it to a better future.
Oh, my goodness. Diversified farmers like you are not receiving any government subsidies. I mean, have you called up your congressman or senator to complain?
Oh, no, I don't want any subsidies.
Okay.
Here's what would level the playing field. I don't want subsidies. What would level the playing field is for nobody else to get subsidies.
I see.
If the bad guys didn't get subsidies, then our side would compete very well. Thank you very much.
Okay.
The fact that we are not getting them creates an unlevel playing field.
Well, Joel, this is so fascinating. Where can our viewers find your book? Is it in all the bookstores?
It's in bookstores. It's on Amazon, of course. Our own, if anybody wants something they can't find, our website is polyfacefarms.com, POLYFACE farms.com. And of course, we have a gift shop, but we also have links for where these things are available.
And you are working with vendors in Arlington, right? You are providing product?
We bring food right in here on about a 6-week rotation throughout the year, right into Arlington because it's within 4 hours of the farm.
Now, what kind of products? You have eggs and...
We have eggs, beef, pork, and these are all pasture-based. We call it salad bar beef, pigerator pork, pastured rabbit, pastured broilers, eggs, turkey, and now our grandsons are getting into it with duck eggs and lamb.
Oh, that's so interesting.
It's a pretty wide array.
So
of
people
things.
can visit the website to find out
Absolutely.
where to go.
Yes.
Okay. Well, it's been great having you here, and I hope that you will come back and talk about one of your other books.
It's been an honor, Lois. Thank you for having me on.
Mm.
Thank you.
And please stay tuned for the next edition of the Bookman's Corner. Thank you for watching. I'm Lois Lindstrom.